Welcome, my friends, to a place where we share inspiration and positivity. Greetings, explorers of knowledge. Join us as we embark on a quest to understand Herbie Flowers. Bryan Keith Herbie Flowers, 19 May 1938 – 5 September 2024, was an English musician specialising in bass guitar, double bass and tuba. He was a member of groups including Blue Mink, T-Rex and Sky, and was also a prolific session musician. Flowers contributed to recordings by Elton John, Camel, David Bowie, Lou Reed, Roy Harper, David Essex, Kooper, Bryan Ferry, Harry Nilsson, Cat Stevens, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr. He also played bass on Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds. He created his most famous bassline for Lou Reed's 1972 hit single Walk on the Wild Side from the album Transformer. By the end of the years, Flowers had played bass on an estimated 500 hit recordings. In this section, we'll be exploring life and career. Flowers was born in Isleworth, Middlesex, England, on 19 May 1938. He began his musical training in 1956 when conscripted into the Royal Air Force, electing at first to serve for 9 years as a bandsman playing tuba. He took up double bass as a second instrument to secure his junior technician stripe and later moved to bass guitar. After completing his military service, he passed through the line-ups of several Dixieland jazz bands in the early years, then discovered modern jazz. In 1965 he was engaged as a bandsman on the ocean liner Queen Elizabeth. After hearing an electric bass at a New York nightclub, he acquired his own solid-body electric instrument, a Lake Placid Blue 1960 Fender jazz bass that he purchased from Manny's Music in New York City for $79. Later in the years, Flowers began to acquire his reputation as a session player, working for record producers such as Shel Talmy, Mickey Most, Steve Rowland, Richard Perry, Gus Dudgeon, and Tony Visconti. In 1969, Flowers was a founding member of the group Blue Mink, playing on their song Melting Pot, which reached No. 3 in the UK singles chart, and early heavy rock band Rumpelstiltskin. He was also a member of CCS and the final lineup of T-Rex, along with Dino Dines. In 1979, shortly after taking part in the annual A Song for Europe contest, performing Mr. Moonlight with his group, The Daisies, he became a co-founder of the band Sky, which had success in the United Kingdom and Australia. Flowers is also known for having composed the novelty hit Grandad for Clive Dunn in 1970. According to Flowers, he came up with it after following an easy primer book on composing. All he needed was a hook, and he was struggling to come up with anything. He telephoned a friend, Ken Pickett, who came round, ringing the doorbell, and the sound of the doorbell provided the hook he needed. Perhaps Flowers' most famous bassline is the one he created for Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side from the album Transformer 1972, a twin ascending and descending portamento. The only single by Reed to reach the top 20 in the US, it reached No. 10 on the UK singles chart and was certified platinum by the BPI. In an interview on BBC TV, Flowers said that he did this because it helped the bassline take on a new character, because that's what old jazzers do. It also meant he got paid a double fee for the recording. Flowers' bass hook was performed on double bass overlaid by fretless Fender jazz bass. He was paid a £17 sterling flat fee. He played and recorded with Mark Bolan from late 1976 until Bolan's death in September 1977. And also appeared with him on the Mark television series in 1977. Following Sky's demise in the early years, Flowers spent most of his time playing jazz. He also worked as a bass guitar teacher at Ardingly College and led many rock shops at schools, helping young people to create and perform their own songs, as well as covering many others. In 1998, session drummer Peter Boiter again teamed up with Flowers to form a rhythm section in musical settings of the words of poet Sir John Benjamin on a second album they recorded together. That album was called Benjamin and Reed. They had previously worked together on the Poetry in Motion album released on Silhouette Records as MDKR1, which also consisted of settings of Benjamin's Bit featuring Boiter and Flowers playing with a line-up of artists that included David Essex, Justin Hayward, Steve Harley, Donovan, Alvin Stardust, Captain Sensible and Annie Haslam amongst others, with Beatles producer George Martin overseeing proceedings. Boiter and Flowers reprised their roles when Poetry in Motion was performed live for a charity show at the Richmond Theatre on 5 April 1992. Benjamin and Reed was one of the last albums recorded at the R.G. Jones in Wimbledon. The vocal artists performing on this album include Cliff Richard, Mark Ormond, Paul Young, John Anderson, Colin Blunstone, Gene Pitney, Leo Sayer, Donovan, Mike Reed, the Rodolphus Choir and David Essex. Over the course of his career, Flowers contributed to recordings by Elton John, Tumbleweed Connection, Madman Across the Water, Camel, Tuba on Nude, David Bowie, Space Oddity, Diamond Dogs, Lou Reed, Transformer, including the two prominent bass lines of Walk on the Wild Side, Melanie Candles in the Rain, Roy Harper, Bullinaming Bays, David Essex, Rock On, Al Kooper, New York City, You're a Woman, Bryan, Ferry, The Bride, Stripped Bare, Harry Nilsson, Schmulson, Son of Schmulson, Cat Stevens, New Masters, Foreigner, Paul McCartney, Give My Regards to Broad Street, George Harrison, Somewhere in England, Gone Troppo, Brainwashed and Ringo, Starr, Stop and Smell the Roses. He also played bass on Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds. By the end of the years, Flowers had played bass on an estimated 500 hit recordings. Moving ahead, let's uncover the hidden gems within Rock On and discover their significance. In 1973, English singer David Essex released Rock On as a single and it rapidly became an international hit. The distinctive stripped-back musical arrangement was devised by producer Jeff Wayne. According to Wayne, only 3 session musicians played on the final backing track, and the most prominently featured was Flowers, whose double-tracked bass guitar was treated with the prominent slapback delay effect, creating a complex polyrhythmic backbeat. I can recall the 3 musicians on the backing track for Rock On all looking around in a mostly empty Advision Studios, Studio One, wanting to know when the rest of the band were arriving. I explained there weren't any others for that track, and I was relying on them to understand my idea for the production. While the drums and percussion parts were written out, it was definitely Herbie that grasped immediately that a bass guitar playing a lead riff could fill a large part of the spatial spectrum, and he took my idea and turned some basic notes of mine into his amazing bass riff. Then to top it off, he suggested playing it again an octave higher. So you get this unusual bass sound right up front. Now it couldn't have been up front if the arrangement didn't allow the air and the space to be created that way. Flowers himself noted that, as a reward for devising the double-tracked bass line, he was paid double his normal session fee, and thus received £24 sterling instead of the usual £12 sterling. Now, let's dig deeper into personal life and unveil the hidden treasures it holds within. Flowers lived in Ditchling, East Sussex, and in September 2009 he founded the community choir Shoreham Singers by Sea, which had in excess of 150 members, followed, in September 2010, by the Ditchling Singers. Brace yourself for an enlightening exploration of death and tributes as we dive into its profound implications. Flowers died on 5 September 2024, at the age of 86. Tributes were paid by Tim Burgess, the lead singer of the Charlatans, who said on X, "Farewell Herbie Flowers, he made the greats sound greater," and by Matt Osman, bassist for Suede, who posted, "Oh damn. R.I.P. Herbie Flowers." So many great bass lines. Imagine having played on Space Oddity, Walk on the Wild Side and Rock On. The estate of David Bowie said that Flowers' work over the years was too long to list, adding, aside from his incredible musicianship over many decades, he was a beautiful soul and a very funny man. As we enter this new phase, let's analyze albums from different angles and evaluate its significance. 1975, Plant Life Phillips. 1980, A Little Potty EMI 1984, Hubby's Stuffed a Wolf 2012, A Jazz Breakfast. Let's now shift our focus to singles and explore the ways in which it shapes our perspective. 1973, Tramp Flanker Polida 1975, Mouth High. It's Herbie Flowers Phillips 1975, Dancing at Danny's Mathematics Phillips 1977, Jubilee News EMI 1978, Don't Take My Bass Away I Want to Be With You EMI 1979, Mr. Moonite I Want to Be With You EMI 1980, Just For You The Whale EMI 1980, Burlington Betty Tramp Big George EMI 1981, Tuba Smarties The Bathroom Song Oriola 1983, I Love a Meet Me on the Corner Magic. Brace yourself for an in-depth analysis as we navigate through collaborations and its far-reaching implications. Source: with David Bowie Mercury Records, 1969 Diamond Dogs RCA Records, 1974 David Live RCA Records, 1974. With Sam Brown Minutes Pod Music, All at Once Records, 1993 Of the Moment Pod Music, 2007. With Chanter Sisters First Flight Polida Records, 1976. With Alan Clark Me Real Name Is Our Old RCA Victor, 1973 Alan Clark EMI, 1974. With Roger Daltrimovica Polida Records, 1980. With David Essex Rock on Columbia Records, 1973 David Essex CBS Records, 1974 Imperial Wizard Mercury Records, 1978 Silver Dream Racer Mercury Records, 1980 Bebop The Future Mercury Records, 1981 Stage Struck Mercury Records, 1982 This One's For You Mercury Records, 1984. With Bryan Ferry Bride Stripped Bare EG Records, 1978. With Albert Hammond Latro Lotto del Sol Epic Records, 1979. With Steve Harley Hobo with a Grin EMI, 1978 Poetic Justice Transatlantic Records, 1996. With George Harrison Somewhere in England Dark Horse Records, 1981 Gontropo Dark Horse Records, 1982 Brainwashed Dark Horse Records, 2002. With Justin Hayward Night Flight Decca Records, 1980. With Elton John Tumble You'd Connection Uni, 1970 Madman Across the Water Uni, 1971 A Single Man Rocket, 1978. With Al Kooper New York City You're a Woman Columbia Records, 1971 A Possible Projection of the Future Childhood's End Columbia Records, 1972. With Paul McCartney Give My Regards to Broad Street Parlophone, EL 26 278-1. With Melanie Cadalls In the Rain Butter Records, 1970. With Olivia Newton-John If Not For You Festival Records, 1971. With Harry Nilsson Schmilson RCA Victor, 1971. With Hazel O'Connor In the Morning Mystic Records, 1997. With Sally Oldfield Witter-Bearer Brahms Records, 1978 Easy Brahms Records, 1979 Celebration Brahms Records, 1980 Playing in the Flame Brahms Records, 1981. With Lou Red Transformer RCA Records, 1972. With Cliff Richard Rock and Roll Juvenile EMI, 1979. With Dig Richards Thing Is, RCA Records, 1981. With Tim Rossello The Kind of Hate Story Capitol Records, 1970. With Chris Spedding at RAK Records, 1977. With Ringo Starr and Smell the Roses RCA Records, 1981. With Cat Stevens Foreigner Island Records, 1973. With T-Rex Sandy in the Underworld EMI, 1977. With Jane Wiedlin Tangled EMI, 1990. Your feedback helps me improve, so please take a moment to leave a comment or review.